I'm excited to be here with this panel. And as I told Donald, I'm a boy from Baltimore, so I'm pretty excited to tell my family I sat on a panel with Visit Baltimore, and I have an aunt and uncle from Myrtle Beach, so got to figure out Lake Charles.
You'll be there soon.
But we'll be there soon.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I think we just wanted to kind of start off with some general questions. Anybody who's been in an airport recently realizes, and as you all probably have talked about over the last couple of days, of how busy the tourism market is and how it's ramped up. I mean, I just came off spring break with my family, so definitely have a sense for how busy things are around the country, and would just love to sort of understand. And also, by the way, this question on this piece of paper said, with inflation, but I saw a headline this morning that said, good news for all of us that inflation is starting to ease, but that has definitely not stopped tourism, and tourism has been incredibly strong. So just throwing out to each of you, how have you been, in sort of your current marketing efforts, been thinking about, and what tactics have you been using in this climate?
So I'll start it off. So, Baltimore is all about crabs, music, and sports, right? And that's going to be a consistent theme. Me being on the data end, I'm sorry, I'm going to get, real geeky with the numbers and kind of tell my business a little bit from a Baltimore standpoint. But heading into the spring and summer, the first thing we have to take a look at is our visitation numbers. Who is coming to our city between that April 1st to August 28th range, right? That spring and summer. And what we find is that 41% of our visitors are repeat visitors, 70% are overnight visitors. So you put those two things together, and one thing that we consistently are finding out is that the people are visiting family and friends, right? And so that's the market that we need to tap into. So in addition to that, one place that I think that we need to take a closer look or be a little bit stronger in is our Boston demographic, right? So you have Southwest, you have JetBlue that have direct flights and do seasonal, campaigns to try to draw Boston travelers down to Baltimore. But they, according to AirDNA, they only account for less than 4% of our actual air travelers. And so how can we increase that pipeline from Boston, right? It's only a 6-hour drive, it's an hour-and-a-half flight. They should be a market that goes to Baltimore more frequently. So what you'll see over the summertime when the Red Sox come to town, you'll see creative ad placements behind home plate. You'll see stuff under the Jumbotron, because we really want to establish that nostalgia, right? We want that visitor equity, specifically from our Boston visitors. And then another thing that we need to tap into is our iconic festivals, right? We have Preakness. A lot of people don't know that's the oldest horse race in the country, right? And it's the second leg of the Triple Crown. Why is that just a weekend festival? That should be an all-week thing for us, right? And then obviously the last thing being our music. We're really trying to rebrand ourselves as a live music East Coast city, destination. And we have 6 live concert venues, all within the downtown footprint. We just recently renovated Royal Farms, which is now CFG Arena. Don't know the last time you've been, but we just hosted the CIAA tournament there. Yes. Yep. So yeah, those are a number of different things that we have going into spring and summer.
Kind of piggybacking on that, we are in a little bit of a different place because, like I mentioned, we're about to launch a brand new campaign that we've been working on since last fall, and that's going to come out at the end of this week. And the campaign is as much joy as you can pack in. So we've really taken a different approach to that. Traditionally in our market, we know that Houston is our bread and butter. They come regularly. They've been in our market. They come with their family and friends. They plan just a weekend trip, and they book within 2 to 3 days. Our goal with this new campaign is really to continue to promote different cultural assets and leverage what those markets already know and tell a new story, a new side of that story with new components, and then promote it in new markets that we've been seeing through fall campaigns that are guaranteed to be spending more. So though Houston, for instance, is our bread and butter, they don't spend as much as our Austin, San Antonio market. So that's where we're launching this campaign at an actual campaign activation at an upcoming festival the first week of May. So that component of it is something that we're really transitioning from our more traditional side of things and focusing on how we get in front of those visitors in different markets to bring them in for the spring and summer travel.
So I think we got 3 different situations with our different destinations. So our unique situation was we did really well during COVID. A lot of beach towns did. We led the nation in recovery from a RevPAR perspective. And part of that was because we continued to market hard and we were really nuanced with our messaging throughout the pandemic. But it's created this situation where we've had our best 2 years of all time over the last 2 years. And so expectations are crazy. More people are moving, house prices going up, worker shortages are a challenge like with everywhere. But if we even see a glimpse of a downturn or year-over-year drop, everyone begins to panic a little bit. So we're really trying to figure out how do we maintain the momentum, knowing that every other destination is doing a great job marketing and taking back some of the share that we were able to get over the last couple of years. So we're taking a more nuanced strategic approach. So we sat down and said, well, what is the purpose of our organization? Well, we're here to serve the community. We're here to protect, improve, and promote the community, to improve the quality of life. And we do that through tourism. And so we sort of looked at the Venn diagram of who we serve, and we serve our customers, the visitors. We serve our local residents and businesses, and we in a way serve our legislators because they hold a lot of the purse strings. So where did those intersect? And then what can we do using storytelling to make sure that we're taking care of all those? And so what we believe is we'll take care of the legislators if we tell stories to them that we're taking care of the businesses and the locals, because they vote, right? And so that will protect our revenue. We'll take care of the businesses and the locals if we tell them stories about the benefits of tourism, how it adds value and improves the quality of life. So it comes back full circle to, okay, our primary objective here is to serve the visitors well, but do that in a way that is, sustainable, is appropriate, is driving the right type of traveler. So instead of just focusing on heads and beds, let's be more nuanced and talk about what are the right types of heads and the right types of beds in the right time of year. And so instead of us just chasing visitors willy-nilly, what we do is we say, well, how do we get people that want to come, that are passionate about the destination, to book earlier, to stay longer, to spend more while they're in market, as our CEO likes to say, to leave broken happy and ready to come back as soon as they leave and want to tell every one of their friends about it. So that's our approach. And what we've learned is as advertising, traditional paid media has become more expensive, more fragmented, harder to reach an audience because of privacy, we've had to change our tactics. So now we've shifted a good chunk of our budget. We're up to 10% of our budget now is on what we consider owned media or branded entertainment. So we're trying to tell stories. We're trying to entice people to come to our destination, not by telling them to come to our destination, but by showing them great experiences, showing them people that have great experiences in making them make the decision. It's a long-term strategy. It's not the direct call to action that a lot of DMOs are doing. I know some are following what we're doing here and doing the same kind of things. I think Josh yesterday from Milwaukee was talking about doing TV shows and things like that. That's a big part of our focus right now, is how do we create content people actually want to consume that instead of telling them to come visit, they choose to come visit. That's what we're focused on.
Yeah, so you've brought up the concept of storytelling, and I think that's where we're going to spend a lot of today. I mean, our clients use creative and data for storytelling, and it'd really be interesting to hear from you is what's good storytelling in tourism for you and in your markets, and what are some of the best practices that you've seen that work really well in defining good storytelling? Anyone can start.
So I'll kick it off. So to me, right, from a data perspective, good storytelling, it should combine about 3 different components, in my opinion. So the first piece is that authenticity, right? And that's kind of been a buzzword. So let's just say keep it real, right? You need to keep it real from a marketing perspective. The second thing needs to be the engagement with your audience. And then the third thing is data. So going back to that first piece, if you're not authentic, if you're not genuine with your approach, you're going to create cynicism instead of tourism, right? And so I think that a lot of times destinations need to do a better job of differentiating between their brand versus their identity. Because you think about it, your brand can change, on a season basis. It changes from time to time. Your identity is timeless though, right? And so you really need to stay true to that, because your audience and your neighbors, your actual neighborhood and your community, they're going to smell that out. Now, from a audience engagement perspective, I don't think you're doing a good job of storytelling if you do not provoke your audience to do something. There has to be an action that comes after that storytelling. So if I don't go to Google and search, hey, what are the best restaurants in Baltimore? If I don't bring up Baltimore in a conversation at a line at Starbucks or on a dinner date, then I'm not doing a good job at that storytelling piece. And then I think the third piece is data, right? You can tell a story, but it won't be good without data. From a Baltimore perspective, we know that 53% of our visitors are visiting family, friends, and relatives. And we also know that when people are trying to determine what they want to do when they come to Baltimore, 1 out of 4 of those people are going to consult family, friends, or relatives or social media. So if we know that, those same family, friends, and relatives have to be a part of our storytelling, and that's going to show and yield itself in our, our neighborhoods and our, minority and women-owned businesses. And so, if your storytelling isn't, if tourism isn't impacting your community, it's really going to fall on deaf ears.
What we talk about in our office is really that it is not our responsibility as the DMO to determine what the visitor is going to find value in. So where we really lean into is our responsibility is to go out into our community and find those partners and community members that we can help elevate their story and communicate that out to the visitor, and the visitor can then decide what they find interest in. And this is everything from the restaurants to the places in the destination and how they experience those outdoor recreation areas. So not just telling them, hey, we have this, but going to the perspective of the owner of the company and letting them share the story of what they're passionate about and why they chose to be here. And when we tell that story, that goes back to them as a visitor then making the decision to do something and to act based on how they were impacted by that story we told. So kind of touching on what Donald said about their family and friends, ours, we know we have 4 casino properties. We know our visitors come to our casino properties. We want them to keep coming. We want them to come often, but we also aren't trying to tell them a story that they might not want to hear. So we're looking at new audiences and kind of going back to that want to hear the new stories that we are cultivating and bringing up in our community, and that they will act so that we still have our core audience, that they know what they love, and then we have a new audience that's really engaged and excited about what they're learning.
That's great. I love that. I think you touched on something that's one of my pet peeves in this industry. I've only been in it a little over a year, almost 2 years now, but I love the last session because the comment about love notes back to your agency, I'm going to use that. But love notes to the industry. We've got to learn how to be better storytellers. And in order to do that, we've got to understand what storytelling is. It's not promotion, right? At the heart of it, story is about emotion. It's about the human condition. It's about human experiences. I think storytelling is not only our main imperative, it's also our biggest tool, our most impactful weapon. And so when we're talking about storytelling, we have to understand what stories we're telling. The destination is not the hero of the story. It's the people that live and work in your community. It's the stories you're telling there so that they can be reflected to the audience, the visitors. The audience has to see themselves in the story to feel something. And so if we're going to be good storytellers, we've got to understand good storytelling. And we've got to understand our position and our role in storytelling. It isn't the hero, it's the guide. We've got to help people along that story. And so I think it's attributed to Plato, but he said the storytellers will rule society. And it's 100% true throughout history. The best politicians, the most influential people have always been storytellers. And if that's our number one job, then good news, guys, we rule society, right? If we do it right. So you guys all rule. But we've got to understand story. And so we've got to know that every story has to have something that either changes the way someone thinks, the way they feel, or the way they behave. Has to do one of those 3 things if it's connecting with people. So we've got to focus on the 3 Ps, which is people, passion, and purpose. There has to be that. Every good story, if you go read, and I encourage everyone to go read as much as you can about story, or listen to podcasts or audiobooks about stories. Go learn about the science of storytelling, the neurochemistry of storytelling. And what you'll find is Every story needs tension. You can't just put up pretty pictures of your destination of people riding bicycles or horses or kayaks or eating food and smiling and then put some clever tagline at the end. That's not storytelling, that's promotion. And we've got to do a better job. We've got to walk people through an emotional roller coaster. We've got to use drama. We've got to use tension. We've got to use humor. We've got to do the things that are going to actually make people feel something. Because psychology shows us that if people make a decision on their own versus being told to do an action, it's a lot more sticky. They're a lot more likely to do it. So one of the things we do through branded entertainment is we'll create shows, like we created a TV show last year called Chef Swap at the Beach. And instead of it promoting the restaurants in Myrtle Beach and saying, come and eat at Myrtle Beach because we're a great culinary destination with 2,000 restaurants, what we did is we said, let's showcase the stories of these people. So I'll give you an example of one of the stories we talked about. So there's a restaurant in Myrtle Beach called Winner's Kitchen. It's run by an amazing lady called Jess. Now, a traditional DMO would sell that by saying, Jess is a great entrepreneur. She has amazing food. This restaurant's right in the heart of downtown. They do a lot of great stuff, right? That's promotion. What we did is we stripped it back to who Jess was. And we learned and we showed on this TV show that Jess was someone that was super passionate about our community because it had helped save her life. She was someone that fell into dark times as a teenager. She was the black sheep of her family. She fell into drug addiction. She fell into homelessness. And it was people in the community that helped her out of that and that gave her a hand up. And she was able to turn that around, and now she wants to give back to the community. So she opened this Winner's Kitchen, which is named after her grandmother, who was one of the people that helped her out of this dark time. And now she gives back to the community. So when you go to Winner's Kitchen, not only do you get fresh food, but you can also contribute back to the community yourself. When you order your meal, you can also order a number one on the menu. It costs you $5. You get nothing for that $5 other than knowing that if a community member, a person in distress, someone that's homeless, someone that is down on their luck, needs a warm meal, they can go into Winner's Kitchen any day without any stigma and ask for a number one and they'll get fed. Now that's a story that will resonate with people, will move people, and not once did we tell people you have to come and eat here. But every single day that I've seen Jess, I say, how's things going? And she says, thank you, because people are coming to a restaurant now because they saw the show and they saw the story. Not one of those was told to come and visit. They chose to come and visit. That's storytelling. That's what we've got to do a better job of.
And I would just sum it up real quick. I look at storytelling as the adhesive between your destination and visitation, right? So if you think about it, good storytelling is going to be like Velcro. You're going to create that visitor equity. Bad storytelling, you're going to have a fall off in visitation.
I mean, we could turn this entire conversation just into a creative storytelling conversation because it's fascinating. I mean, there's so much rich content that, and I heard even in the last session, so much rich content that you're all working with every single day. And, you know, I have to say I'm sort of come from a creative background myself, but, you know, in today's world, so much of our creative is defined by data. And so how do you use data to inform your storytelling? And then each one of you just pull out maybe an instance where there was a piece of data that you found that brought you a new story.
So for us, we really look at our data points and look at spend, of course. With our economic impact, we're really trying to drive beyond the measurements of your hotel occupancy, your STR data, and look at how people are spending in our market and how we can continue to influence them and communicate to those people who are spending in specific areas to then move around the destination and spend in other areas. For us, we're in Louisiana. Everyone knows us for our food. You probably know us for our boudin, our crackling, gumbo, crawfish. But one of the areas that we saw was that so many of our markets, that's what we have been promoting. That's what we have been sharing. And little did we even quite know the gravity of our food scene in Lake Charles. So with this data that we had seen that people were spending there, we looked at how we were telling the story of our culinary scene. Similarly to Stuart, we went in and found 5 different chefs in our community, and we created a video series that really talked about who they were, what they did, and how they told their story. And they were in all parts of our community, and none of them were specifically those Louisiana traditional dishes that everyone knows and loves in our area. And between that, we then elevated that particular series. We made a video series, and we did our paid advertising with that. We let it in our organic channels, and we boosted our earned media, and even were able to get one of the most phenomenal stories in the community on the NBC Nightly Show. So it was all that component of looking at something that we knew was already there, where people were spending, knowing that we were trying to drive that economic impact via the spend, and looking at how we told a different story, and product development a little bit with that, and moving them through the destination. And we saw a return in every aspect.
So I would say, so recently, last summer, we teamed up with Destination Analyst, and we did a sentiment study. Really wanted to get brand perception, top of the mind associations when you think of Baltimore. And so let me back up. From a visitation standpoint, we know that 60% of our visitors to Baltimore come from that Northeast I-95 corridor. So if you're not familiar with the Northeast I-95 corridor, that's between Boston and Richmond. And so knowing that 6 out of 10 visitors are coming from that area, we wanted to target that area and determine, how do they feel about Baltimore? And I get a little personal here with our destination. One thing that, we're trying to overcome from an obstacle standpoint are some of the negative perceptions. And what we were able to determine with the help of Destination Analysts was that, Boston, New York, Newark, New Jersey, Philly, Richmond, they didn't have any negative perceptions of Baltimore. In fact, when we took a look at the data, they looked at Baltimore just as safe, if not safer, than their own destination. So where was all this negative perception coming from? It was coming from all of our counties, our small towns, Annapolis, Frederick, Washington, D.C., all the locations that are within a 130-mile radius of Baltimore, right? So we had to figure out how can we combat that along with that local, WJZ, Fox 45, local negative media storytelling, right? And so what we did in the fall, we kicked off a culinary campaign. And as opposed to in the past where we've really tried to highlight our iconic restaurants and our chefs from our own city, we expanded that Baltimore footprint to include our counties and our neighboring cities and, just within, PG County and that within that 130-mile radius. And the goal behind this was that if these other towns outside of Baltimore can see that their restaurants and their businesses are within our marketing campaign, then they'll feel a part of that Baltimore footprint, and then we can start trying to change that negative perception. And they won a silver Addy, by the way. Shout out to our marketing team. Trish McLean oversees that, does a phenomenal job, so.
That's great. Yeah, data's everything. We have a phrase in our team. We say content is king, the visitor experience is queen, and data's the crown jewels. We use data to dictate every decision we make. Now, storytelling in general is considered an art, but it's also a science, the science of psychology, the science of effectiveness, the science of influence. And so we look at data from a lot of different perspectives. Obviously, when we're ideating, we look at data. We look at to your point, we look at perception studies. We look at what are the things that are resonating with people, where are there rooms for opportunity? Like, how do we stack up? How's our culinary scene compared to other destinations? How's our live music scene to other destinations? So we look at that and we sort of cherry pick and say, what are the things we want to work on? Okay, culinary and live music seem like opportunities for us. So let's tell stories around those things. We also look at what content is resonating with people. We'll look at, at Google Analytics data, see what blog articles are getting read the most, or which episodes of our podcast are getting listened to the most. And we'll look at Google Trends a lot. We'll see what are people thinking about that we're not covering. We'll look at the search in our own website. One of the recent things we did, which I thought was pretty cool, shout out to our friends at MMGY and their paid search team, is they started looking at the search trends for every major holiday throughout the year and looked at when do they start to ramp up and when do they start to dwindle. And we're using that data not just to inform our paid media strategy of when we should be putting advertising out there, but we're also using that to make sure that our content is out in front of that. So that when do we start talking about Valentine's Day or 4th of July or these other things? When do we promote that? So we're doing that a lot on the holistic level, and then we're also obviously measuring the impact of a lot of what we do. And we measure in a lot of ways. Obviously, visitation is important, but we're also measuring it in terms of audience building. Like, I think if we look at what I mentioned earlier, with paid media becoming less effective and more expensive over time, and we want to shift to owned media, the purpose of that is to build our own audience and to build a deeper relationship with the visitor and at an individual level. So we spent a lot of time over the last year or so constructing a customer data platform that's launched and collecting data, but we're getting ready to roll out the next phase, which is really personalized conversation with the consumer. So understanding you as an individual and what your interests are and what you've liked before, what you've interacted with before, what you've given us signals about before, and making sure that we bubbled that content up to you. And that might be different than the next person that comes to our website or reads our email or other stuff. So I really believe that we're in the relationship business, and the best way to build relationships with anyone is through conversations. And so we've got to stop talking at people and start soliciting feedback, a two-way conversation with our customers. So things like surveys, things through like just clicking on things on your website, understanding what that means and inferring that from that the next step. Because again, storytelling is about wielding influence on people and how they think, how they feel, and how they behave. And you've got to crack the first two. You've got to make them think positively about you. You've got to make them feel positively about you so that they choose to come and visit you. And more importantly, as you build those audiences, they become your secret sales force. They become your evangelists. And if you can build audience and people that are focused on your content as well as your destination, they'll become the people that tell their friends more about your destination. And then what you'll start seeing is you can hook people into the content as a gateway to getting them to your destination. We've seen it across the board. We saw someone mention yesterday or the day before about White Locusts and wanting to go to Sicily, or Yellowstone, or Outer Banks, or Ozarks, right? These weren't DMO initiatives. They were content pieces created for entertainment that have led to tremendous visitation. And it wasn't that they were promoting the destination. In a lot of cases, there was some pretty nefarious stuff going on, right? And no DMO would want to touch it. But the reality is people see past that. They see the story as a story. They see the destination as a destination. So how do we make our destination the backdrop of the story so that people choose to come to visit?
So the data, I'm going to still stay on the front end on the side of data because I think it's so important. So the data marketplace is changing, new forms of data coming in. We've got privacy concerns, cookies, everything. What are some of the areas that you've relied on in the past in data that maybe you're trending away from? And what are some new areas of data that you're using or something that may have surprised you that you're now using to inform your storytelling? Something new and something that maybe you're relying less on?
So recently we started partnering with the Tourism Sentiment Index. So we wanted to determine what are our tourism assets, right? What are the things that, we can kind of wear with a badge of honor in Baltimore? And what we discovered is that we rank in the 90th percentile when it comes to museums and historical attractions. Some people refer to it as heritage tourism, right? And so knowing that we rank in the 90th percentile domestically, we also know that when people come to our city, 1 out of 8 people actually go to a historical attraction or a museum. So if we're telling our story, we can't tell a good story without including, Fort McHenry or the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. So, yeah.
Great.
I think for us, on the advertising side of it, really taking away and not looking at those vanity metrics as much is a core component of how we're looking at the success of our advertising campaigns, and focusing on how they drove interaction, how they drove, if it was a e-newsletter sign up, did that person then engage? How did we actually target them? Did we segment that audience and break that down? So I think as a holistic level, that's where we've really been focusing, is stepping away from those things that we might have looked at in the past and said, hey, this was really successful because we had this or this, but now we're looking at this is how they engaged, this is where we saw them show up, this is how we told that story and how successful that was, and that that's been a really big piece of what we do, or what we've been doing, is just stepping away from the vanity metrics.
Yeah, I love that. Likewise, we're doing a lot to move away from those easy, quick vanity metrics that don't really mean anything. You know, you can't put a referral in the bank. Like, it doesn't mean anything to the business that you're sending it to unless someone actually comes and stays. So we're trying to understand the value of things, right? We're trying to understand, what does it mean if someone watches a 30-minute TV show on the cooking channel? How much value does that drive to us? And how can we track that back? Trying to even figure out, when I have an ad that's running somewhere and someone comes to my website, how do I quantify the value of that person and track it all the way through to potentially arrival, but certainly, you know, what they interact with on our site, in our partner sites. So we're doing a lot of work around that. I don't think anyone's really cracked that nut, but I think a lot of smart people are trying to. I think it's important that you put the rigor into thinking about it, though. That, to me, is the most important thing, and looking at things through multiple lenses. Because it's easy to say, yes, this campaign was a win or this campaign was a failure, but miss the bigger picture. Just because you didn't get the impressions that you wanted or the clicks you wanted, people may have shown up in destination because it may be that the quality of that audience was so great, right? Or likewise, on the flip side, just because you get a ton of traffic, it may be garbage traffic. So I think we've got to be nuanced in how we think about that. We're also thinking about data from the individual's perspective, you know, and I think it's important that we recognize it's not our data, it's the consumer's data that they're giving us permission to use in a way that helps them. And I think the first part of that is to stop calling them users or thinking of them as a list size or an email address, and start thinking about them as individual people. And then we can start to have real conversations with those people based on what we know about them. Like, really emulate the real world and say, okay, you like this, maybe you'll like this. Like, oh, I know this about you. This is going to help you make a decision. So I think humanizing the data we have is really important. Like I said, we built a CDP. We're trying to leverage that to be more personalized in our approach. And part of that is trying to collect and understand what people are actually doing, what they're connecting with, what they're engaging with, what they're actually doing. So yeah, I think it's about to change again, right? Because with the onset of AI, we're going to be able to, it sort of makes big data little, and it's going to allow us to take in a lot more data in a more meaningful, insightful way and make better decisions. So I think now's the time to lay the framework so that you can capitalize on that in the next couple of years as it takes root.
So data's really important for storytelling and devising your storytelling and authenticity and identity. I thought that was really great. How about the use of data in placing media? And, you know, I have a background in connected television. That's a great place to tell stories, right? I mean, I built an ad tech platform in that space for local and regional. And now at Talon, you know, we're in a very data-driven, out-of-home storytelling market. And so I'd love to lean into out-of-home a little bit. I'm sure you're using different media. Which media are you leaning into? And I'd love to sort of hear your thoughts. As out-of-home has become a data-driven, everything that we do is planned through data and is measured. So how do you think about data and measurement? Which media you're leaning into, and how do you think about out-of-home playing a role in storytelling?
Okay, I'll let you guys speak to this. Yeah.
In terms of out-of-home, we're really looking at new and creative ways that we're trying to get in front of this audience. Our brand is so much about the juxtaposition of our different destination and what we have to offer. So when we're thinking about out-of-home, where can we put our message in front of a potential new audience that we've said this is a qualified audience, and really looking at that way, because it is sometimes hard to measure out-of-home. And we understand that, and that's why when we make a decision with those partners, we really focus on where that out-of-home is and who's seeing it, and knowing that that's more of an impression share, but the right audience in the right place.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think, you know, out-of-home has gotten a bad rap, but I think it's evolved, and folks like yourself are doing a good job enabling technology and data to help us make better decisions. It used to be very much spray and pray with no measurement, right? And now it's not. So you can definitely be more of a scalpel approach than a hatchet approach. We don't do a ton of out-of-home, but what we do is experiential. We try to break people out of the monotony. It's not promotional in the traditional sense. We don't say, come and visit Myrtle Beach. we'll try to have playful interactions with people. There's a campaign we ran last year up and down the 95 corridor where we were, based on where it was, we calculated the distance to the beach, to Myrtle Beach. We call ourselves the beach. And we put that on the billboards. So if you're driving down from Ohio or New York, you could see how much further it was to Myrtle Beach, like 300 miles to the place you belong at the beach and things like that. Again, we struggle to measure the impact, but anecdotally, people loved it. We heard a lot of feedback. It was the most commented on piece we'd done from an out-of-home perspective. And even our local community really loved it, because they noticed it. And when they were going to visit folks up north and coming back, they would see it. So I think that's being creative with out-of-home is really important, and being deliberate, trying to break away from the monotony. The other place we're shifting, Diane from my team spoke yesterday about we're shifting from linear to digital and connected TV, and we're taking a sort of to glass approach. So we're trying to bypass the individual apps and thinking about it more on the OEM level. But the other place is we're really interested in integrated campaigns. A lot of the folks in the industry that are already writing great content and have great audiences that are looking for interesting new experiences, that's who we want to get in front of their audience. So doing more advertorial stuff, doing more experiential digital things, we've seen that being really impactful for our storytelling, because instead of just throwing people out and saying, visit Myrtle Beach and we have these assets, and us being the hero of the story, we can start to share human interest stories, human experiences that people connect with, and then they in our web, and then we can push them down a funnel.
Well, I think we're out of time, unless anyone wants to throw something in the last minute here. But I think
I would say go read as much as you can on storytelling. I think 5 of the last 10 books I've read were about storytelling. There are tons out there. Go read Building a Brand Story, The Art of Storytelling, The Science of Storytelling, How to Tell a Story. Go read all these books. Some are great, some are not, but you'll learn something from every one of them. And so learn how to tell a story.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that data is a core piece of so much of how we make decisions, but data is not your story. Data is a supporting evidence to tell the story and craft the story. And it must be used, but is not the lead of any story.
Donald, do you want one last one?
No, just, again, from a business intelligence standpoint, in addition to storytelling, I'm kind of tasked to, depending on the department, right? So from a marketing standpoint, I hand the data off and I make suggestions, I make encouragements, right? But from a sales perspective, when we're trying to get certain business, that's when I'm able to be more on attack mode and say, hey, this is the type of business that we need to attract for Baltimore. So all of that goes into the overall brand and storytelling for your destination. And if anyone ever wants to connect to talk about some of the dashboards and the type of databases that we use, I'd love to give you the real on, the good ones versus the not so good ones. So.
Great. Well, I hope somebody was taking notes here, because there are some amazing quotes here. I just want to say we love this category, and the storytelling that you do with your businesses, your brands, whatever you want to call it, I think other categories could learn from. So thank you very much. It was a really great conversation. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.